High above the altar, the sky tore itself open. A crescent of pale light silently emerged, vast and cold, as though space itself had been carved apart by an unseen hand. No spiritual sense detected it. No warning preceded it, yet the moment it appeared, every cultivator present felt an instinctive chill crawl up their spine. This was no ordinary phenomenon. It was a spatial tear. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. With a more pressing matter at hand, Han Li knew this was no time to study the demon core. With a casual flip of his hand, he stowed it away. He then tossed 3 empty spirit beast pouches into the air and pointed toward the gold-devouring beetles. The beetles let out sharp screeches before instantly splitting apart into 3 swirling clouds, each one flying back into a pouch. Once the beetles were returned, Han Li silently summoned the 36 bamboo cloud-swarm swords back into his sleeve. As they vanished, the aureate sword formation surrounding the lake dissolved, the golden radiance fading away. "Let's pick the fruit and be quick about it," Han Li said calmly. "I don't know how long the illusion formation will be able to stall the ghost spirit sect cultivators." With that, his figure turned into an azure streak of light as he flew across the lake. Violet Spirit immediately followed after him, and soon the two arrived, hovering 6 meters above the strange spirit plant. Han Li swept his gaze across the plant before turning to Violet Spirit. "You should pick first, but be careful. These spirit fruits are quite peculiar. They must be stored in wood attribute materials, or their medicinal power will dissipate within a few days. Many thanks for the warning, Brother Han. I will be careful." Violet Spirit suppressed her excitement with great effort and smiled at him. Without the slightest hesitation, she waved her sleeve, summoning a dark green wooden box into her hand. With a flick of her wrist, a white streak shot forth, and in the blink of an eye, one of the fruits vanished. The white streak immediately flew back and slipped into the wooden box, carrying a spirit kindle fruit within it. Violet Spirit closed the lid, let out a long breath, and carefully placed the box into her storage pouch. "What?" Han Li was momentarily stunned. "You aren't taking another?" Violet Spirit replied with a gentle smile. "Many thanks for Brother Han's generosity, but one is enough for me. Aside from providing some information, I did very little in finding this place. It was entirely thanks to Brother Han's abilities that I was able to obtain this fruit. Although we share a measure of friendship, I cannot take an equal share. Brother Han should take the remaining fruits. After all, besides refining nature origin pills, they can also be used to directly increase your cultivation." Han Li was genuinely surprised by her words. Truthfully speaking, Violet Spirit was renowned throughout the scattered star seas for her beauty indeed. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, but she was also known to be sharp and calculating. Ever since the exquisite sound sect had been seized from her, her temperament had changed noticeably, prompting Han Li to keep his distance. Now, however, she spoke with reason and restraint. Whether her words stemmed from sincerity or careful calculation no longer mattered. Han Li's impression of her improved greatly. To restrain one's greed in the face of a worldly spirit fruit was no easy feat. "Since Violet Spirit has said so, I won't stand on ceremony," Han Li said with a nod. He slapped his storage pouch, and a flash of white light appeared as a wooden box he had prepared in advance landed in his hand. With his other hand, he flicked the box open. An azure glow spilled out, enveloping the remaining 3 spirit kindle fruits. The fruits trembled slightly before detaching from the plant and drifting into the box bound by the azure light. Once the box was safely stored away, Han Li said gravely, "Let's go. We can't remain here for long. We don't know when the ghost spirit sect will discover this place. While I'm not afraid of fighting them, these pills must be refined as soon as possible." Violet Spirit pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Of course. The fruits won't last long. However, we can't return the way we came, otherwise we'll run straight into them. Wouldn't it be better to choose a direction and find a secluded place several thousand kilometers away to refine the pills? As for where to go, that will be up to Brother Han." "Where to go?" Han Li frowned slightly and looked around. Suddenly something occurred to him. He slapped his storage pouch and a piece of worn, coarse silk appeared in his hand, the map of Devilfall Valley he had obtained from the azure silkworm robes. He carefully studied the map while comparing it to his surroundings. A look of surprise flickered across his face. This desert was not far from a marked area on the map. At their speed, they could arrive there in roughly 2 days. After staring at the crude markings for a moment, Han Li fell into deep thought. Seeing that Han Li did not immediately reply and was instead examining a rough piece of fabric, Violet's spirit grew curious. However, being perceptive, she chose to wait quietly, not disturbing him. "Follow me," Han Li finally said. "We'll refine the pills first before deciding anything else." With that, he put the map away. He then glanced once more at the spirit plant behind him and frowned. Raising his hand, he chopped downward, sending a streak of azure light that severed one of the plant's twigs. Yet the instant the twig touched the ground, it withered and turned to ash. A trace of regret appeared in Han Li's eyes. It seemed the records were true. This spirit-kindle fruit tree was unlike ordinary spirit plants. It was one of the rare spirit roots that could not be transplanted. Any attempt to do so would result in its immediate death. Without lingering any longer, Han Li raised his hand and released the wind-riding chariot in a streak of light. The two boarded it, and in a flash the chariot shot into the sky, quickly shrinking into a tiny white speck on the horizon. Even before departing, Han Li had already planned his next steps first. Find a secluded place to refine the nature origin pills and consume their medicinal power as soon as possible. Only after that would he carefully study the map and seek out the secret treasures it marked. Given how mysterious the map was, any treasures recorded on it were sure to be extraordinary. As long as the danger was not overwhelming, Han Li would certainly investigate those locations. About 2 hours later, a group of ghost spirit sect cultivators arrived at the oasis. The lake had frozen solid, and the spirit plant at its center was now devoid of fruit. Seeing this scene, the cultivators exchanged stunned glances. Elder Zhong's face in particular was deathly pale. By that time, Han Li had already traveled more than 500 kilometers toward the marked area. Shortly afterward, he and Violet Spirit left the desert behind and entered a region of rolling green-yellow plateaus of varying heights. Han Li couldn't help but sigh in amazement at the sight. Devilfall Valley truly lived up to its name. It seemed as though every kind of terrain in the world was gathered within its bounds. After traveling for half a day, Han Li urged the wind-riding chariot onward and eventually arrived at a mountainous region. Although the mountains were not particularly tall, Han Li traveled more than 100 kilometers into the range before stopping above an unremarkable small mountain. Hovering nearby, Han Li said, "Fellow Taoist Violet Spirit, this is the place. We'll refine our pills separately. I've already swept the area with my spiritual sense. There are no ancient restrictions or spatial rifts nearby." Violet Spirit glanced around and smiled. "Many thanks, Brother Han. Then I'll take my leave." With that, she flew toward a neighboring mountain and began preparing her own hidden cave residence for pill refinement. Watching her disappear, Han Li turned back toward the wind-riding chariot. Standing 10 meters away, he formed an incantation seal with his hands and waved it toward the chariot. The chariot shrank into a streak of light and returned to his sleeve. Han Li then flew toward a small mountain directly ahead. Before long, he carved out a simple cave residence using dozens of flying swords. He arranged a small spell formation outside the entrance and placed 8 core formation-grade puppets there to stand, guarding against any unexpected intrusions. Only after completing all preparations did Han Li finally feel at ease. He entered the inner chamber, tossed his storage pouch into the air, and used his spiritual sense to pull out the many materials he had prepared for refining the nature origin pill. They spilled onto the ground in a mist of white light. Moments later, Han Li summoned the wooden box containing the spirit-kindle fruits as well as a unique azure cauldron. Both floated silently before him. He narrowed his eyes as he stared at them, then let out a deep breath before sitting down cross-legged. This would be his first time refining the nature origin pill. However, his attainments in pill refinement were already profound, and he was well prepared. Moreover, he had made extensive preparations before entering Devilfall Valley. Not only did he possess multiple spirit kindle fruits, but he also carried ample supplementary materials enough to allow for several failed attempts without serious loss. As for whether Violet Spirit would successfully refine her spirit kindle fruit, Han Li was not entirely certain. She had never displayed her pill refinement skills before him. Still, the fact that she had taken only a single fruit suggested she had considerable confidence in her abilities. With that thought, Han Li fixed his gaze on the small cauldron spinning slowly in front of him. He opened his mouth and exhaled a stream of nascent flame. The flame coiled around the cauldron once before plunging into its core, igniting it as roaring fire erupted within. The nascent flame flickered within the small azure cauldron, releasing scorching waves of heat that rapidly raised the temperature of the room. A cold glint flashed through Han Li's eyes. He raised his hand and struck the cauldron with a spell seal. With a faint ringing sound, streams of azure light rose from its surface and began to circle around it, lifting the cauldron smoothly into the air. Han Li then pointed toward a square jade box. It opened soundlessly, revealing a pitch-black stalk several inches long, flat round and strangely lustrous. He stared at the stalk for a brief moment before waving his hand, summoning it from the box to hover 3 meters before him. With a flicker of blue sword light, he sliced off a fifth of the stem. Sweeping his sleeve, an azure cloud of light surged forward and tossed the severed piece into the cauldron. Immediately afterward, Han Li struck the remaining stalk with a spell seal and sealed it back into the jade box. Without sparing it another glance, he pointed to a long wooden box. It opened to reveal a glistening green spirit herb. Using swordlight once more, Han Li cut off a small portion and cast it into the cauldron, just as he had done with the previous ingredient. One by one, he continued to measure out and sever the appropriate portions of various materials, dropping them into the cauldron in strict accordance with the nature origin pill's formula. Finally, it was time for the spirit kindle fruit. Han Li carefully cut away a quarter of the fruit and placed it into the cauldron. He then pointed at the floating cauldron and firmly shut its lid, sealing it tight. Taking a steady breath, Han Li began the next stage of refinement. He opened his mouth and expelled a stream of azure nascent flame, which wrapped itself around the cauldron in roaring fire, further driving up the temperature of the room. His gaze locked onto the cauldron as his fingers flicked continuously, launching spell seals one after another. Before long, peals of thunder rang out from within the cauldron, their sound growing steadily louder. Han Li frowned slightly at the noise and began to form different hand gestures in quick succession. As a result, the thunderous sounds fluctuated soft one moment, deafening the next. A sharp light flickered in his eyes as he examined the situation inside the cauldron. His expression stiffened, yet he remained perfectly still and composed as time slowly flowed by. While Han Li was immersed in pill refinement, the Ghost Spirit Sect Masters Group finally climbed to the summit of the giant altar within the basin. It was unclear why the ancient cultivators had placed such peculiar restrictions upon the altar's steps. With every step upward, the burden on one's body increased dramatically. By the time they reached the middle section, their pace had slowed to a crawl. It took them an entire day to ascend from the midpoint to the summit, far longer than the mere 4 hours required to reach the middle. Along the way, they even had to stop and rest for half a day to recover their magical power. The nascent soul cultivators managed well enough, but the 3 core formation disciples were barely able to endure the climb. On the final few dozen steps, each movement felt as though 1,000 tons were pressing down upon them. Only by drawing upon every shred of strength could they inch forward. Naturally, the journey posed little difficulty for Wei Wuya. From beginning to end, the restrictions seemed to have no effect on him at all. As for the other 2 nascent soul cultivators, even they grimaced as they struggled through the final steps. Wei Wuya's effortless demeanor throughout the ordeal left a deep impression on Wang Tiansheng. the ghost spirit sect master, causing him to regard Wei Wuya even more highly. Despite the differences in cultivation among the group, Wang Tiansheng made a point of ascending the altar without stopping. The instant he stepped onto the summit, the immense pressure vanished entirely. The ghost spirit sect disciples finally breathed sighs of relief upon reaching the top. Even though they had protected their bodies with spiritual light, they still felt soreness throughout their limbs, as though they had reverted to mortal flesh. It was a sensation they had not experienced in ages, rare indeed for cultivators to ache simply from walking. Wang Tiangu and the other nascent soul cultivators paid no attention to this. Their gazes were already sweeping across their surroundings. The summit of the altar spanned over 300 meters and was paved with gleaming white jade bricks. At its center stood an offering table, more than 20 meters long, exquisitely carved from dark green jade. At each corner of the altar rose a towering stone pillar, each nearly 30 meters tall. The pillars were densely engraved with ancient and profound talismanic symbols. Atop each one rested a stone Qilin statue, vividly carved and faintly glowing as if alive. All of this entered their sight in the blink of an eye. Wei Wuya found nothing particularly remarkable among these structures. He frowned and glanced toward Wang Tiansheng, who stood with his hands behind his back, staring intently at the sky. Curious Wei Wuya followed his gaze and saw a stretch of crimson sky. At a relatively low altitude, an area shimmered with multicolored light. Aside from several faint strands extending outward, there was nothing obviously unusual about it. "Clown Master Wang, we've arrived," Wei Wuya said bluntly. "Where is the entrance to the Spirit Ether Garden?" Wang Tiansheng replied calmly, "Do not be impatient, fellow Taoist Wei. The entrance is concealed by a restriction. The method to dissolve it is known only to the soul within the scroll. We must summon him." Wei Wuya's expression shifted. "So that's how it is. You've made an agreement with Master Kang Kun's doppelganger." Wang Tiansheng chuckled. Fellow Taoist Wei is indeed perceptive. "Yes, I reached an agreement with him. Please wait a moment." He reached into his sleeve and took out a silver-white scroll. Wang Tiangu's expression flickered as he silently stepped closer. At that moment, Wang Tiansheng unfolded the scroll. A ball of silver light shot out, materializing into the figure of a Confucian scholar. "Not bad. This is the place," the manifested soul said, looking around with unconcealed excitement. "I never thought there would truly come a day when I returned." Ignoring the others entirely, he savored the sight. Wang Tiansheng stared at him coldly. "As agreed, I have brought you to the altar. It is time for you to uphold your end of the bargain and open the passage to the Spirit Ether Garden." "You've already placed restrictions on me," the scholar replied calmly. "Are you still afraid I'll deceive you? The entrance does lie above the altar, but the restriction is rather peculiar. I must personally open the way." With that, he raised his head and brought his hands together, summoning a sphere of grey flame. With a wave of his hand, he flung it skyward, striking the shimmering rainbow light only for the fireball to vanish without a trace. Seeing this, the scholar nodded and turned toward the stone pillars. "Fellow Taoists, if you channel some spiritual power into the 4 stone pillars, I can continue dissolving the restriction." The nascent soul cultivators exchanged glances. After a brief hesitation, Wang Tiansheng said grimly, "Very well. We'll do as he says. You 3 disciples take the pillars. Junior Martial Brother Wang trouble you to handle the last one." "As you command, Sect Master." The disciples responded in unison. Wang Tiangu also moved toward a pillar without hesitation. Under Wang Tiansheng's direction, the 4 placed their hands upon the pillars and slowly poured spiritual power into them, channeling it upward into the stone Qilin statues above. Before long, the pillars emitted strange cries and trembled faintly. The Qilin statues began to glow, their eyes lighting up crimson as though awakened. Wei Wuya's expression grew uneasy. The scene before him felt strangely familiar, yet the memory remained just out of reach. The ghost spirit sect master watched in silence. Suddenly, the Qilin statues slowly raised their heads. Their mouths opened, revealing radiant rainbow light within, as though something was about to erupt. At that instant, the Confucian scholar moved. He lifted his hands and flicked his fingers, sending a single grey spell seal toward each statue. The light within their mouths pulsed violently before beams of rainbow light shot skyward, converging into a 3-meter-wide sphere of brilliance. The surrounding space warped and distorted before rupturing in a world-shaking explosion. Blinding rainbow radiance engulfed the altar as violent waves of spiritual chi surged outward, shaking the heavens and earth alike. Even Wei Wuya's expression darkened under the pressure of those fluctuations. The others instinctively retreated several steps, hastily circulating their spiritual power to defend themselves. Fortunately, the explosion was brief. In the blink of an eye, the rainbow light faded and the spiritual chi dispersed. The cultivators steadied themselves and looked skyward. Wei Wuya's face turned pale. He slowly turned to the Confucian scholar and asked coldly, "This is the so-called entrance to the Spirit Ether Garden." 300 meters above the altar, a crescent-shaped arc of light silently appeared in the sky. The arc was pure white, nearly 100 meters wide, and over 1,500 meters long. It resembled an enormous spatial tear, yet it was shrouded by some unknown restriction. Despite the presence of 3 powerful nascent soul cultivators, none of them had been able to sense its existence beforehand. Could this truly be the entrance to the Spirit Ether Garden? Even with their vast abilities, none of the nascent soul cultivators, Wei Wuya included, dared to approach the spatial tear rashly. The terrifying sharpness of a spatial tear was not something a cultivator's body or techniques could withstand. This realization filled Wei Wuya with suppressed rage. The Confucian scholar glanced at the cultivators and spoke calmly. The Spirit Ether Garden is a pocket realm suspended between the spirit realm and the mortal world. To enter it, assistance from this spatial tear is unavoidable. With some modification, it becomes the entrance itself. Be at ease, I won't have you charge straight through it. There is another method we can attempt for now, though it carries some danger. Even I only have a 70% chance of success. As for core formation cultivators, their strength is insufficient. If they enter, it would merely be sending them to their deaths. The Ghost Spirit Sect Master, Wang Tiansheng, wore an ugly expression. 70%. You never mentioned this before. The Confucian scholar let out a cold laugh. Would it have made any difference? Even if the chance were only 20%, you still would have tried. A cold gleam flashed through Wang Tiansheng's eyes. He suddenly raised his hand, producing a crimson command medallion. "What are you doing?" The Confucian scholar shouted in alarm as he hurriedly retreated. Without a word, Wang Tiansheng waved the medallion. It flared with blazing crimson light. The Confucian scholar screamed and collapsed onto the ground as countless crimson talisman characters appeared across, his limbs crawling endlessly over his body. A soul-fright curse. Wang Tiangu shuddered as he exclaimed in shock. Even Wei Wuya's expression turned strange at the sight. Staring at the writhing scholar, Wei Wuya said indifferently, "This is one of the Ghost Spirit Sect's secret curses, the Soul-Fright Curse. I've heard it's even more ruthless than ordinary soul restriction techniques. With but a single thought from the caster, the victim's soul can be scattered." Wang Tiansheng turned to him with a broad smile and chuckled. "Fellow Taoist Wei is truly knowledgeable. That is indeed the curse. This remnant soul believes itself to be the peerless Master Kang Kun. Such arrogance, how could it recognize the mercy of others? Naturally, it needs to be disciplined." Wei Wuya nodded and said nothing further. No matter how complete its memories were, a remnant soul could not be allowed to run rampant. The Confucian scholar endured unbearable torment. Each time the crimson talisman characters flickered, his body convulsed violently as he clutched his head and rolled on the ground. His face twisted in agony. After the time it would take to finish a meal, his materialized form began to blur and grow indistinct. Only then did Wang Tiansheng wave the medallion again, finally ending the torture. With unquestionable authority, Wang Tiansheng said coldly, "You should understand your position now. Even with Master Kang Kun's memories, you are nothing more than a remnant soul. Act foolishly again, and I will not be so lenient. I do wish to enter the spirit ether garden, but I will not be led by the nose. So long as you sincerely guide us, I will honor our agreement. I understand. Green light flickered across the Confucian scholar's body as his form stabilized once more. His expression returned to calm composure. I will open the passage now. Wang Tiansheng was secretly surprised by how quickly the scholar regained his composure. Just as he narrowed his eyes and prepared to speak again, the Confucian scholar began to glow with green light and slowly ascended toward the spatial tear. Wang Tiansheng swallowed his words. Opening the path to the spirit ether garden took precedence over further punishment. Wei Wuya and the others remained silent, coldly observing the scholar. It was unclear how he intended to open a passage through such a fearsome spatial tear. The Confucian scholar halted 60 meters from the tear and raised his head. With a strange expression, he spat out a ball of green light. Within it floated a pitch-black pearl the size of a thumb spinning incessantly. The moment the pearl emerged, the scholar's complexion turned deathly pale, his figure dimming noticeably. It was clear that the pearl contained the majority of his soul power. Suppressing his weakness, he pointed at the pearl and shouted, "Go!" The pitch-black pearl immediately flared with light and shot toward the sky. Wang Tiansheng watched in astonishment. What exactly is he trying to do? Before the cultivators could recover from their shock, the pearl was dragged toward the spatial tear. A flash of white light erupted, space distorted violently, and the pearl vanished without a trace. For a brief moment, the spatial tear appeared unchanged. Then the Confucian scholar suddenly descended rapidly, increasing his distance from it, his expression dark. Wei Wuya and the others were stunned. Before they could understand his actions, a muffled rumble echoed from the spatial tear. The center of the tear began to glow green, rapidly expanding into a 3-meter-wide sphere of blinding dark green light. A sharp hiss pierced the air from within. With an emotionless face, the Confucian scholar landed on the altar and said, "Prepare yourselves. Focus the entirety of your spiritual power into the green light. Only then can the passage to the spirit ether garden be opened." Wei Wuya and Wang Tiangu exchanged glances, bewilderment flickering across their faces. After a moment's thought, Wang Tiansheng made a resolute decision. "Let's try it first and see what happens." Wei Wuya frowned, glancing once more at the dark green light, but said nothing. Wang Tiangu likewise voiced no objections. The 3 nascent soul cultivators separated and formed hand seals. Raising their hands, they unleashed beams of light of varying colors into the dark green sphere at the center of the spatial tear. Their profound cultivation immediately evident. Wei Wuya's beam was as thick as a bowl, while the others were slightly thinner. As immense spiritual power poured in, the sharp hissing sound intensified. Moments later, the dark green light gradually deepened into jet black, forming a pitch-black hole barely a foot in diameter, its destination completely unknown. Seeing this, Wang Tiansheng and the others were overjoyed. The scene clearly showed that the Confucian scholar had not deceived them. They circulated their spiritual power even faster, thickening the beams of light and strengthening the passage. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the hole expanded to nearly a meter across, just large enough for a person to pass through. The Confucian scholar calmly said, "You can now enter. However, the passage remains unstable. I no longer possess a second realm tear pearl. If you do not wish to be trapped on the other side, you must continue supplying spiritual power to stabilize it." Wei Wuya and the others were startled. Seeing the black hole waver, they dared not stop and continued pouring in spiritual power. The passage stabilized visibly, though at the cost of enormous energy. Yet moments later, it began to destabilize again. Wang Tiansheng frowned deeply. He turned and barked, "You 3 assist us. Though your cultivation is weaker together, you'll suffice." "Yes, Sect Master." The 3 core formation disciples rushed forward, hastily channeling their spiritual power and firing beams of light into the black passage. The Confucian scholar simply stood aside, watching silently. As time passed, Wei Wuya and the others expended nearly half their spiritual power. At last the passage stabilized completely, no longer flickering. Relief washed over the cultivators as they withdrew their spiritual power. Wang Tiansheng narrowed his eyes. This truly is the entrance to the spirit ether garden. The Confucian scholar did not respond. Instead, Wei Wuya spoke. It should be genuine. I can already sense the other side there is an immense space beyond. His expression shifted as he licked his lips unconsciously. Though the others lacked the spiritual sense to verify it themselves, they rejoiced upon hearing this. Since Brother Wei confirms it, it should be correct. Still, caution is best, Wang Tiangu said, forcefully suppressing his excitement. With a wave of his sleeve, he sent a wisp of black mist bearing the silhouette of a small ghost into the passage. That's all for today's content. See you in the next part. Support me by becoming a member. It will give me more motivation. Thank you so much.